Imagine waking up tomorrow morning, right? You lace up your running shoes, and you head out the door for a jog.
Okay, seems healthy.
Yeah, and you do this the next day, and the next. Now, I want you to imagine maintaining this exact same routine every single day for 64 years.
Oh, wow, 64 years.
64 years. But here is the catch. Imagine realizing at the end of those 6.5 decades that your cardiovascular health hasn't improved, even a fraction of a percent.
Wait, really? Like zero improvement?
Absolutely zero. Your resting heart rate hasn't dropped. Your VO2 max is completely unchanged. You haven't gained a single ounce of endurance or speed.
That sounds incredibly frustrating.
Right. You just spent a lifetime sweating for absolutely zero tangible physiological adaptation.
I mean, that completely challenges the fundamental assumption most of us hold about, just human endeavor in general. We are so culturally conditioned to believe in this compounding nature of effort.
Yeah, the whole put in the 10,000 hours thing.
Exactly. We operate under this safety blanket that basically says, if I just put in the hours, the universe or, biology will eventually reward me with mastery.
But it doesn't always work like that.
No, it doesn't. From a purely mechanical standpoint, whether we are talking about muscle hypertrophy or neurological rewiring, mere repetition without progressive overload or the correct systemic stimulus is, well, it's just a performance. It's wear and tear disguised as growth.
Which perfectly brings us to the core of today's deep dive. We are looking at what happens when that comfort blanket of just putting in the time becomes a cognitive blindfold.
Right. Especially in the realm of personal development, meditation, and energy work.
Exactly. And we are pulling today's insights from a remarkably candid set of teachings by Osman. He's widely known as the Blind Muslim Yogi.
And Osman represents just this fascinating collision of paradigms. I mean, he's a master-level bioenergy healer who specializes in critical care recovery and terminal illnesses.
Yeah, he's dealing with heavy life-or-death stuff.
Very heavy. Yet he approaches these deeply mystical practices with this razor-sharp, almost clinical pragmatism. He has been practicing healing, yoga, and meditation at an advanced level for 50 years.
50 years. And he actually attained his first samadhi, which is, a state of profound meditative absorption, by the time he was just 19.
Which is incredibly rare. But instead of just kind of floating away into that esoteric space, his entire mission is about simplifying ancient yoga protocols into highly efficient, verifiable mechanics. He wants a scientific approach.
What really stands out to me in the source material is that his approach is not trying to be an alternative to modern medicine.
No, not at all.
He is highly explicit that his energy healing is complementary. He actively encourages people to consult medical professionals.
Which is so refreshing to hear in the wellness space.
Seriously. But within his specific domain of energy and breathwork, he's as ruthless about results. If a practice isn't creating a substantive shift in your physiology or psychology, he argues that enduring it for a lifetime is not some badge of honor.
Right. It is a tragedy of wasted time.
So, to really understand why that time gets wasted, we have to look at the tension between a high-potency initiation and daily mechanics.
Yeah, the spark versus the fuel.
Exactly. And the source material kicks off with this incredibly sobering case study that perfectly illustrates this. It involves an 80-year-old student of his whose spiritual journey essentially flatlined for over half a century.
Let's lay out the timeline for her because the numbers alone are they're staggering.
They really are.
So at the time of this recording, she is 80 years old.
Right.
Her story begins 64 years prior when she was just 16.
Just a teenager.
Right. And at that age, she receives an initiation from a highly advanced, incredibly powerful master. Osman actually knows of this original master and openly admits that this individual's level of power was even higher than his own.
Wow, so she's getting the real deal right out of the gate.
Exactly. She receives this profound initial spark. She dedicates her entire life to the practice. And yet, after 64 years of daily commitment, she has made zero substantive progress.
Okay, let's unpack this because we need to define what that lack of progress actually
Yes.
looks like. I mean, biologically and psychologically.
Sure.
She wasn't just sitting in a room doing nothing, right? She was actively practicing a form of pranayama.
Specifically, alternate nostril breathing, or Nadi Shuddhana.
Right. But she was doing it at a remarkably amateur level, just 3 rounds a day. And she maintained that specific, limited dose for 64 years.
It's like going to the gym for 64 years, but only lifting 2-pound weights with terrible form.
Yes, that is the perfect analogy. You're showing up, You're sweating a little, but you're not actually training the muscle.
Exactly.
So I want to pause on the mechanics of that. Alternate nostril breathing is constantly touted in wellness circles for balancing the nervous system.
Oh, everywhere. It's huge.
But you're suggesting that doing 3 rounds of it is useless.
Hmm.
What is actually happening, or I guess not happening, in the body when someone does such a minimal amount?
Well, alternate nostril breathing is designed to manipulate the autonomic nervous system. When applied correctly, it forces a balance between the sympathetic branch, which is our fight or flight response, and the parasympathetic branch, our rest and digest state.
Okay, that makes sense.
It does this by altering the flow of air, which influences the production of nasal nitric oxide. And that's a vasodilator that helps open up blood vessels and improve oxygen uptake.
Right, which sounds great.
It is great. Furthermore, sustained rhythmic breathing at specific cadences stimulates the vagus nerve, signaling the brain to lower your heart rate and blood pressure.
But those physiological shifts don't just happen because you block your nostril a couple of times, do they?
No, absolutely not. There has to be a threshold of stimulus. That is the critical missing piece in her practice.
So 3 rounds just doesn't cut it.
Not even close. To create a lasting shift in vagal tone, or to meaningfully alter the oxygen to carbon dioxide ratio in the bloodstream to force cellular adaptation, you need sustained duration and precise technique.
Because 3 rounds might take, what, a minute? Maybe 2?
Yeah, barely 2 minutes. It is enough to perhaps trigger a momentary psychological placebo of, I am doing my calming breath, but it is entirely insufficient to cross the threshold required for neuroplasticity or sustained autonomic regulation.
So she was basically providing a whisper of a stimulus to a nervous system that required a clear, sustained command.
Exactly. Which brings us back to the distinction Osman makes between the initiation and the protocol.
Right. The initiation is the spark. It's that moment of profound awe or energy transmission from the master.
But the spark isn't the fuel. Think about the neurobiology of an initiation or a profound spiritual awakening. It often involves a massive surge of dopamine and serotonin.
Just flooding the brain.
Yeah, alongside a temporary downregulation of the default mode network, which is the part of the brain responsible for our sense of ego and boundaries.
So it feels universally shattering in the best way possible.
It does. And for a tiny fraction of people, Osman notes, that initial shock to the system is so powerful that just a touch of practice afterward keeps the momentum going.
Like, their neurochemistry essentially catches fire and just sustains itself.
Yes, but that's incredibly rare. For the other 90% of humanity, the brain seeks homeostasis. It wants to return to its baseline.
Right, because the brain is an energy conservation machine at the end of the day.
Exactly. The awe fades. The neurochemical spike subsides. If you want to maintain that elevated state, you have to systematically force the nervous system to adapt to a new baseline.
And that requires those precise mechanical protocols you mentioned.
The correct number of rounds, the right cadence, the specific posture. Osman's protocols are drawn from the Yoga Sutras and decades of refinement, functioning essentially as systemic engineering.
So this woman received the high voltage spark at 16, but spent 6 decades trying to run a massive engine on a few drops of incredibly diluted fuel.
That's a great way to put it. And the most agonizing part of this case study isn't just the 64 years.
Oh, right. It's the fact that Osman actually crossed paths with her 25 years ago.
Yes. He assessed her practice. He saw the physiological and spiritual plateau she was trapped on. He explicitly warned her that her methodology was fundamentally incapable of producing further growth.
And she entirely rejected his advice.
Completely. We have to explore the psychological barrier there because it is far more rigid than the mechanical one.
Why did she say no? Was she just stubborn?
It wasn't laziness or standard stubbornness. She rejected it out of a profound sense of blind loyalty. Her original master, the one who initiated her at 16, had passed away.
Ah, I see.
Yeah. In her mind, altering the protocol he gave her, even by a fraction, equated to a betrayal of his legacy.
Wow. It's a textbook example of the sunk cost fallacy, but mutated into an identity crisis.
Exactly.
Because the sunk cost fallacy usually applies to, like, money or time. We stay in a bad movie because we already paid for the ticket, but when it comes to spiritual or personal development, the investment is our sense of self.
Right. To admit that the practice is flawed is, to her, admitting that the last 40 years of her life at that point were misdirected.
It's terrifying to confront that level of cognitive dissonance. When a routine becomes tied to our identity, when we view ourselves as the dedicated student, the brain stops measuring the outcome and starts rewarding the mere repetition of the act.
The basal ganglia, which is the brain's habit center, just locks the behavior in, and the prefrontal cortex stops evaluating its effectiveness.
So she was no longer practicing for growth.
Or
She was practicing to maintain her internal narrative.
exactly.
But wait, I want to push back on Osman's stance here for a second.
Okay, go for it.
Aren't we always told that consistency is key? Trust the process, right? Chop wood, carry water. I mean, if I start a new language learning program and I'm not fluent in a month, I shouldn't just abandon it and blame the protocol.
That's a fair point.
How do you know when you're just being impatient versus when a practice is fundamentally broken for you?
That is the pivotal question. And it requires us to separate blind repetition from targeted adaptation. Osman addresses this by dismantling the whole idea of the one-size-fits-all perfect master.
Okay, how so?
He points out a reality he's observed in his decades of practice. About 90% of people might adapt easily to a specific, powerful initiation or protocol.
So it works for the vast majority.
Right. They get the spark, they do the basic practice, and they elevate. Their nervous systems are primed for that specific key. But 10% of people will feel absolutely nothing without alternative guidance.
And that 10% isn't failing because they lack willpower.
No, they are failing because of structural incompatibility. Think about the physical variations in human vagal tone, lung capacity, trauma stored in the fascia, and baseline neurochemistry.
It's also different from person to person.
Exactly. A breathing technique that beautifully regulates someone with a hyperactive sympathetic nervous system might completely destabilize someone who is chronically in a dorsal vagal freeze state, like a state of shutdown.
That makes total sense. So the intention of her original master wasn't flawed.
Not at all. The power wasn't lacking. But the translation of that power into a daily protocol for her specific constitution was incomplete.
So taking new advice to enhance your practice isn't a betrayal of the foundation.
No.
It's like if an elementary school math teacher teaches you addition, and then you hire a college professor to teach you calculus, you aren't betraying the first teacher. You are acknowledging that different stages of development require different mechanics.
A perfect parallel. But spiritual and personal development often gets entangled with ego and dogma in a way mathematics doesn't.
People treat their chosen modality like a rigid religion rather than a dynamic science.
And Osman is heavily advocating for the scientific method applied to the self. Hypothesis, testing, observation, and pivot. Use the word scientific. He insists on it.
Which makes me wonder how many listeners are currently trapped in their own version of the 3 rounds of alternate nostril breathing.
Oh, probably a lot.
Right. Maybe it's a career where you've been doing the exact same entry-level tasks for a decade, calling it gaining experience, but you aren't actually acquiring new neuromotor or cognitive skills.
Or it's a therapeutic modality. You've been doing talk therapy every week for 5 years, but you still have the exact same panic attacks.
You are confusing the maintenance of a habit with the progression of a skill.
And the hidden cost of that confusion is the immense tragedy of wasted time.
Yeah, that part is heartbreaking.
Osman actually describes feeling a deep sadness when looking at this woman's wasted 64 years. He mentions another student who wasted 50 years in a similar state of stagnation.
Over a century of combined human potential, locked away behind a mediocre routine because they confused suffering and patience with efficacy.
Exactly.
So to break out of that trap, we have to reevaluate who we look to for guidance. We have this culturally ingrained archetype of the perfect guru, right?
Yeah, the guy sitting under a tree.
We want the monk isolated on a pristine mountain peak. We assume that detachment from society equals purity of knowledge. But Osman's own life absolutely dismantles that ascetic stereotype.
Completely. And it explains why his protocols are so fiercely pragmatic.
Let's talk about his background, because Osman's biography is a masterclass in stress inoculation. He is the antithesis of the sheltered mystic.
First, it is absolutely crucial to note that he is permanently blind.
Right, and this is recent, right?
Yes, he lost his sight recently in May 2023. He often uses visual language in his teachings because he lived with normal eyesight for decades prior, but he is navigating his current reality without sight.
Which is a massive life shift.
Massive. Despite this, he isn't isolated. He has been an entrepreneur running businesses for 29 years. He is a contributing member of society, a taxpayer, and a father who is currently raising 2 minor children.
Here's where it gets really interesting. He is embedded in the exact same chaotic, high-stakes, stressful reality that you, the listener, are navigating.
The IRS, supply chain issues, parenting a toddler, He is dealing with the modern world, not hiding from it.
Does being embedded in the messy, stressful, tax-paying real world actually make someone a better guide than someone who avoids society altogether?
I would argue yes. And he didn't start from a baseline of purity either.
Right, he had some serious struggles.
He speaks incredibly candidly about his past intense struggles with addiction. He enjoyed partying. He was deeply addicted to alcohol and cigarettes.
But he quit, right?
Yes, he finally quit about 18 or 19 years ago. He is totally transparent about the fact that the only reason he avoided hard drugs was a self-aware terror that his addictive personality would utterly consume him if he crossed that line.
That admission changes the entire dynamic of his teachings for me.
How so?
Well, when a monk who has never tasted alcohol tells you how to manage your desires, it is entirely theoretical.
Right.
When a guy who is profoundly addicted to dopamine-spiking substances tells you how to rewire your nervous system, he is speaking from the trenches. He knows what a hijacked dopamine reward pathway feels like, and he knows the exact mechanical effort required to repair it.
That's a brilliant point. And beyond the psychological resilience, he also manages significant physical health challenges.
Like the neuropathy.
Yes, he deals with neuropathy, which involves damage or dysfunction of one or more nerves. It typically results in numbness, tingling, muscle weakness, and pain.
And how does he manage that? Not with, like, magic healing crystals, I assume?
No, to manage this, he doesn't rely on mystical thinking. He relies on nutritional biochemistry.
I love that.
He maintains a strict, whole foods, plant-based, keto-style diet because that is what scientifically lowers inflammation and supports his mitochondrial function best.
Let's expand on that because the dietary approach reflects his overall philosophy perfectly. A keto diet shifts the body into producing beta-hydroxybutyrate,
Right, the ketone body.
which acts as a signaling molecule to significantly reduce oxidative stress and inflammation in the nervous system. He is using food as a precise biological tool to manage nerve damage.
And crucially, he isn't dogmatic about it. While plant-based keto works for his specific neurobiology, he openly respects the science behind omnivore or carnivore diets for other individuals.
Because he acknowledges that different genetic makeups and microbiomes require different protocols.
Exactly. It's the exact same logic he applies to meditation. The protocol must fit the individual's mechanics.
So going back to my earlier point, I'd argue that this chaotic, messy background makes him an infinitely better guide than the secluded monk.
Oh, without a doubt.
If you isolate yourself in an ashram where your meals are provided, the temperature is controlled, and silence is mandated, achieving inner peace is essentially playing the game of life on the easiest possible setting.
Right, your nervous system isn't being challenged by external stimuli. It's the difference between practicing a martial art against a compliant partner in a dojo versus having to defend yourself in a crowded street.
Yeah, and Osman achieved his advanced states, including his early samadhi, while building a life in the world.
Now, he did put in immense grueling work. He talks about periods where he was practicing meditation, hatha yoga, and pranayama for 16 to 18 hours a day.
16 to 18 hours, that is insane.
He saturated his system in the mechanics. But because he had to subsequently integrate those massive, intense states of consciousness with the demands of being an entrepreneur and a father, he had to figure out what actually worked efficiently.
Right. When you have 18 hours a day to meditate, you can afford a lot of fluff in your routine. When you have a business to run and kids to feed, you have to distill those thousands of hours of practice into a highly concentrated, potent methodology.
He acted as the beta tester for the extreme limits of the practice. He navigated the dead ends and the plateaus so that he could reverse engineer the minimum effective dose for the rest of us.
The minimum effective dose, like in pharmacology where it's the lowest amount of a drug that produces a clinically significant result.
Exactly. Osman has applied this to energy work. And this brings us back to the climax of the 80-year-old student's story.
This is where the narrative shifts from tragic to almost unbelievable.
It really does.
So 25 years ago, she rejected his advice. Fast forward to recently. She is nearly 80. She finally drops the ego.
She finally opens her mind and allows Osman to teach her his specific protocol.
Now remember, she has been doing the exact same ineffective breathing for 64 years. Osman gives her a protocol that takes just a few minutes a day. What happens physiologically and experientially?
On the very first day, she experiences unimaginably substantive progress.
Wait, on day one?
Day one, a depth of connection, physiological comfort, and energy movement that she hadn't fathomed achieving over the past 6 decades. She achieved it in a single session with the correct mechanics.
64 years of a locked door, and it swings open in 5 minutes. That is mind-blowing.
It definitively proves that her capacity for growth wasn't broken. Her biology wasn't the issue.
The lock was fully functional. She was just frantically jamming the wrong key into it for her entire adult life.
It entirely redefines our understanding of time in relation to mastery. We assume mastery requires a lifetime of suffering. Osman demonstrates that mastery is actually about precision.
The specific technique, tailored to the human nervous system, yields an immediate physiological response. Let's look at what this precise protocol actually looks like for a modern person, because Osman makes a version of it entirely free.
Right. He offers a 5-minute yoga and meditation program on his website.
For everyone listening, you can find it at yogawellness786.com. And we should note, he used to have a $5 anxiety fix program, but that is no longer available.
Good to know. Just focus on the free 5-minute program at yogawellness786.com.
He designed this by stripping away the esoteric fluff and focusing entirely on the most potent essence of ancient scriptures.
We aren't talking about hours of chanting. We are talking about 5 minutes of highly specific neurological and respiratory tuning.
To illustrate how this functions in a normal life, Osman provides another case study.
Yeah, a busy 28-year-old man. This is a young professional deeply embedded in his career. He doesn't have time or interest in becoming a mystic. He just wants a tool to assist his health, his focus, and his stress levels.
Sounds like most of us.
Exactly. So he begins implementing this free 5-minute practice.
And what's the timeline for his results?
Within just a 2-week period, the young man experiences a tangible shift. He starts to feel a distinct development of energy in his forehead region.
Okay, let's translate energy in the forehead into biology, because that phrase can easily lose people. What is he actually feeling?
When you engage in precise, focused meditation and specific breathing cadences, you are altering blood flow in the brain.
Okay.
Specifically, you increase blood flow and oxygenation to the prefrontal cortex, the area behind the forehead responsible for executive function, focus, and emotional regulation.
Right.
Simultaneously, the amygdala, the brain's fear center, begins to quiet down. What he is subjectively experiencing as energy is the tangible neurological sensation of his attention networks coming online and his blood vessels vasodilating in that specific region.
Wow.
It comes with a profound sense of psychological comfort and clarity.
And because he felt that tangible biological comfort within 2 weeks, his behavior naturally adapted. He actually started doing more of it.
Yes, he naturally increased his practice to 15 or 20 minutes.
But he didn't scale up his practice because Osman commanded him to, or out of some puritanical guilt. He scaled it up because it felt good.
Exactly. The dopamine reward system was finally being utilized correctly. He got a positive physiological result, so his brain craved more of the productive behavior.
That is the cornerstone of sustainable habit formation.
Mm-hmm.
The practice becomes a pull, not a push.
A pull, not a push. I love that. When you are forcing yourself through a routine that yields no results, you are constantly relying on willpower, which is a highly finite resource.
Totally.
When the protocol works, it becomes intrinsically rewarding. And this leads to what is arguably the most radical and important rule Osman proposes. I call it his golden rule of practice.
The 2-week rule. Lay it out for us.
Osman states unequivocally that if you are applying a protocol correctly, you must observe substantive progress or positive feelings within a 2-week period.
2 weeks.
If you do not experience a tangible shift in that time frame, you must change the method.
I want to really sit with that because it is incredibly disruptive to the self-improvement industry. It destroys the entire business model of selling people decade-long programs of delayed gratification.
It really does.
He is saying that spirituality, health, and psychological growth should not be a black box. You don't just dump decades of grueling work into a void and hope for a prize on your deathbed. You demand receipts along the way.
Remember earlier when you pushed back regarding the language learning analogy? Let's unpack the difference there.
Oh yeah, the Spanish class thing.
Right. When you are learning a structural skill like a language or the guitar, you are building entirely new synaptic pathways from scratch. Yes, that takes time.
Sure.
But even then, within 2 weeks of good instruction, you should be able to play 3 chords clearly or introduce yourself in Spanish. You have a receipt of progress.
That makes perfect sense.
In energy work and meditation, you are not building a new structure. You are unlocking an existing biological system. The vagus nerve is already there. The prefrontal cortex is already there. The correct key should turn the lock almost immediately.
If the key fits, the engine turns over. If
Ugh.
the engine doesn't start in 2 weeks, you don't keep turning the key for 60 years, you check the battery, or you get a new key.
Exactly. And Osman points out that when this natural energy flows correctly, the systemic effects are massive.
What kind of effects?
He claims that following his protocol improves natural energy, which in turn boosts natural immunity by up to 90%.
90%. That sounds hyperbolic until you look at the endocrine system. Let's break down the psychoneuroimmunology behind that claim.
Go for it.
Chronic stress and a hyperactive sympathetic nervous system flood the body with cortisol and adrenaline. Chronic elevated cortisol actively suppresses the immune system. It inhibits the production and efficacy of white blood cells and lymphocytes.
Right.
So by utilizing a protocol that forces parasympathetic dominance, you drastically lower cortisol levels. The moment the chemical suppression is lifted, the immune system rebounds to its natural, highly aggressive baseline.
You aren't magically adding armor to the body. You're simply removing the biochemical chains from your own white blood cells.
Exactly. You are allowing the body to do what it has evolved to do over millions of years. And this demystification is deeply empowering for you, the listener. It shifts the entire power dynamic.
You are no longer subservient to the guru or the app or the diet plan.
The teacher provides the tool, but if the tool is blunt and doesn't cut the wood in 2 weeks, you don't blame your own lack of strength. You sharpen the axe, or you go find a different saw.
Consider how many areas of our lives could be revolutionized by this ruthless pragmatism.
Think about diet culture.
Oh, that's a perfect example. Someone might strictly follow an anti-inflammatory protocol they read online for 6 months, yet their joints still ache and their brain fog remains.
And out of loyalty to the concept, they just assume they aren't trying hard enough.
Osman's philosophy dictates that if there isn't a substantive physiological shift within a short, defined window, the protocol is failing your specific microbiome and genetics. You must pivot.
But pivoting requires confronting our own ego. Admitting that a protocol isn't working means admitting we made a mistake in choosing it.
Like the 80-year-old woman.
Exactly. For her, accepting a new 5-minute technique meant staring down the barrel of 64 wasted years. That is a terrifying psychological cliff to stand on.
It takes immense bravery to drop the ego and say, I was wrong, let's try something else.
The tragedy of stagnation is that it provides a very comfortable hiding place from the grief of wasted time.
Wow. Yeah, as long as you keep doing your 3 amateur rounds of breathing, you can pretend you are on the path.
But Osman's message, despite the harsh reality of the wasted decades, is fundamentally an optimistic one.
It is. The time was lost, yes. But the capacity for profound change wasn't degraded by the waiting.
It was literally sitting there, fully intact, waiting on the other side of a highly precise 5-minute protocol.
I think Osman's own journey through blindness really emphasizes this resilience.
Right, losing his sight entirely in May 2023. Imagine the neurological shock of losing your primary sense after decades of relying on it.
Yet he adapts. He continues to teach. He continues to run businesses. He uses the visual language of his past to guide people in the present.
He doesn't stagnate in the grief of the loss. He applies his own mechanics to rewire his reality and keep moving forward.
It perfectly illustrates his core tenet. Force and strain are counterproductive.
When we face massive trauma like sudden blindness or a terminal illness or deep addiction, our instinct is to tense up, right, to fight reality.
But in the realm of deep psychological and physiological shifts, tension blocks progress. If you grip the steering wheel so tightly your knuckles turn white, you can't feel the subtle feedback of the road.
That's exactly why the 80-year-old was stuck. She was gripping her routine with white knuckles. She was performing a rigid ritual out of fear and loyalty, completely disconnected from the actual biofeedback her body was trying to give her.
The true practice has to be dynamic. You have to be awake to the data your body is feeding back to you.
A dynamic practice is a conversation with your nervous system.
The 28-year-old man was listening to that conversation. He felt the blood flow, he felt the comfort, and he allowed that positive feedback to naturally draw him deeper into the practice.
It was a pull of curiosity and reward, rather than the push of obligation.
A pull, not a push.
So as we bring this analysis full circle, the overarching lesson here demands an immediate audit of our own lives. Stagnation is not a sign of discipline.
And during a practice, a relationship, or a career that yields zero tangible growth does not make you a morally superior person. It just makes you a person who is stuck in a loop.
It requires us to cultivate the courage to question our mentors, our systems, and our own deeply held identities.
And questioning a mentor doesn't equal disrespect. Osman holds immense respect for the master who initiated his student at 16. He acknowledges the master's profound power.
But he also recognizes the objective reality, that the specific protocol did not translate to that specific student. Accepting the data of your own reality is the highest form of respect you can offer your own potential.
So true.
I want you, the listener, to run that audit right now. What is your personal equivalent of the 3 rounds of alternate nostril breathing?
Is it a fitness class you attended 3 days a week for 4 years, yet your body composition and strength haven't changed since month 2?
Is it a productivity system that requires more energy to maintain than the actual work it's supposed to organize?
Is it a therapeutic loop where you endlessly analyze your childhood without ever changing your present-day behavior?
Finding those areas of blind loyalty is the crucial first step. And the liberating second step is realizing that correcting the course does not require you to blow up your entire life.
You don't need to quit your job, abandon your family, and move to a Himalayan cave for 18 hours a day to break a cycle of stagnation.
Exactly. Sometimes the difference between a lifetime of being hopelessly stuck and experiencing immediate, unimaginable progress is simply adopting a new, highly precise 5-minute protocol.
Like the one at yogawellness786.com. It's about finding the minimum effective dose of the exact right medicine, rather than dutifully swallowing buckets of a placebo.
It is a profound call for efficiency in how we spend our lives. We have a painfully limited amount of time on this earth.
Osman's deep sadness over those wasted decades, 50 years for one student, 64 for the other, should serve as a stark warning.
We owe it to ourselves to demand receipts from the habits and ideologies we dedicate our precious energy to. If it's not working, change the method.
Change the method.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over. We started with the story of the 80-year-old woman. She spent 64 long, dedicated, exhausting years locked behind a door she simply couldn't open.
She assumed the door was heavy, or that she wasn't strong enough, or that the master wanted her to struggle against it.
But on the very first day she applied the correct 5-minute technique, the door swung wide open with almost zero resistance.
The contrast between the effort expended and the sudden ease of the result is it's staggering.
It is, and it begs a profound question about how we view our own struggles. If a 64-year roadblock can be entirely bypassed in just a few minutes by simply using the correct mechanics, what does that say about the nature of time, suffering, and transformation?
We are deeply conditioned to believe that true mastery, deep healing, or fundamental change must always be a grueling marathon of endurance.
But what if it isn't? What if the long timeline of your own transformation is entirely an illusion created by inefficient methods? Is true mastery really about bravely enduring the marathon, or is it simply having the courage to stop running in the wrong direction, drop your ego, and find the exact right key for the lock?